It was created by my late friend, Toon Roymans. Toon Roymans was a Dutch graphic artist, and he never told me, Toon never told me what his drawings meant. He left it, artists never do. So I was particularly impressed by this drawing of his. What I see in the drawing is a beautiful metaphor for the wonderful diversity of the universe we live in. Toon's icons symbolize to me the amazing contents of the cosmos, from ants to black holes. The ancient Chinese mystic philosopher Lao Tse spoke of the 10,000 things that spring from the ineffable power of creativity, which he called the great Tao, or way of life. And by the way, I would like to say that in this latest issue of our newsletter is a very nice article about Lao Tse and the Tao. Now, in his philosophical treatise, the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tse says, the great Tao covers everything like a flood. It flows to the left and to the right. The 10,000 things depend upon it, and it denies none of them. I have a copy here of the Tao Te Ching, one of the translations, there are numerous translations, and I believe it's somewhere on the table so that you can take a look at it after the service. Now, coming back to Toon's drawing, note that each icon is different. Note also that the icons are arranged in an orderly array. And to me, this expresses the miraculous fact that the universe has order, that it actually can be analyzed by mathematics. To Einstein, this was the most mysterious aspect of the universe. And for the next 2.5 millennia after Lao Tse, philosophers and theologians have speculated about who or what created the 10,000 things, and for what reason. And now there is a book called The Grand Design that has been published. It's written by two eminent physicists, Hawking and Mlodinow, who say the search is over. They have found the answer. And the answer is the ultimate theory of physics that explains everything. This theory is the only possible one, they say, and it explains even how the universe created itself. Hence, philosophy about the universe is no longer necessary. It is dead. Science has taken over. And God, the Creator, has become irrelevant too. So in what follows, we'll try to unpack this a little bit and try to find out what to make of this. Is this hubris or enlightenment or what?
I think it's humor.
You're running ahead of the story. The kind of philosophy that Hawking and Mlodinow say is dead is the philosophy that deals with the nature of the universe. And it used to be called natural philosophy. It's now called science. The other kind, which ponders question of good and evil, false and true, body and soul, got the name moral philosophy. Now, the two scientists say nothing about that one, so maybe it's still alive. In the West, natural philosophy was actually the first to blossom. And some ancient Greek philosophers came up with amazingly accurate guesses. For instance, Anaximander proposed that the Earth floated unsupported in space. This was a revolutionary idea, of course, at that time. And Democritus assumed that atoms underlie everything in nature. Nature is atoms and the voids, he said. However, after Plato and Aristotle, natural philosophy languished because the idea took hold that the universe could be explained by just thinking about that you didn't have to do any experiments to find out what was going on. Aristotle's influence on teaching was so strong that it suppressed doing experiments for the next 2,000 years, until the 17th century. Archimedes was an exception, being arguably the first and last modern scientist of ancient Greece. But in the 17th century, in a relatively short time, thinkers and experimenters like Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton changed natural philosophy into what we now call science. Now, meanwhile, moral philosophy developed into religion with endless speculations and arguments about the nature of God. And it wasn't until Galileo and Newton discovered the laws of motion that rules the behavior of solid bodies that a glimpse was seen of what God was actually doing in the universe. You could argue that scientists were empirical theologians who found out more about God's works in 100 years than theologians had in 2000. I'm not saying this because I'm a scientist. By the end of the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment, it had become clear that the universe was like a complicated clockwork with the 10,000 things that we heard about behaving according to known laws. The deists thought that God had just sort of wound up the clockwork at the creation and then let it go its own way. The theists maintained that God would intervene in the course of events from time to time as a kind of micromanagement. Science itself had developed its own methodology called the scientific method, which did not allow any supernatural concept because you couldn't do anything with them. After all, you cannot predict the mind of God. When the famous French astronomer Laplace was asked by Napoleon why he had never mentioned God in his book Celestial Mechanics, he said, "I had no need of that hypothesis, sire." And that has been the stance of science ever since. Now, during the 19th and 20th century, the ideas about the nature and environment of the 10,000 thing changed beyond recognition. Einstein showed in his theory of relativity that space, time, and gravity were connected in a curious way that nobody had expected. To give an example, if my twin, which I don't have, but if I had one, if my twin should travel away from me at a very high speed close to the velocity of light, her clock would run appreciably slower than mine. And if she ever returned, she may find me much older than herself, or even dead. As regards atomic theory, this had gradually developed the ideas of Democritus into a strict mathematical discipline called quantum mechanics. And it was discovered by quantum mechanics, to everybody's surprise, that there are basic uncertainties in the laws of physics that strongly affect the behavior of atomic particles. These are not uncertainties because we don't know enough. These are uncertainties that are built in the fabric of the universe. Now, interestingly enough, however, for the large objects that we deal with, all these uncertainties kind of cancel out, so that in our everyday world we can use regular Newtonian mechanics. The same applies to special relativity theory. In our everyday world, we never come even close to moving with the velocity of light. So any relativistic effects we never notice. Now this is kind of an interesting thing because it brings up, it appears that what is meant by physical reality depends very much on the physical concepts and laws that are used to describe the world from your perspective.